Hello, today's tutorial is going to be concentrating on the Reaper Shipwreck Revenant. Now, I've been pre-shaded a while back, so all I'm doing here is spraying over some of the paints from the Lifecolor Weathered Wood set, the darker shades initially. The arms and legs of the model, or the bits that could be detached, were left separate because there's so many sort of, odd angles and nooks and crannies that it made it far easier during the painting process just to make sure all the areas were covered. A few bits were still missed, these were touched up later. Now, most of the pre-shade was covered up. I wasn't really after an alternative light source as such from the pre-shade, but it was nice to have it there because it still provided some variation to the base coat. Next up, I used Deathworld Forest Green to paint the lichen and the moss. You see the airbrush is being held really close into the model, so I didn't spray over the wood effects, but obviously certain areas the two colours were blended in to create a more organic effect. So the base coat's dry, a coat of Althonian Camo shade was added to the Litchen just to really get in the recesses and bring out the details as much as possible. Then a very liberal coat of Agrax Earthshade was added all over the wood sections. Again, this helped bring out the detail, really also brought out the grain of the wood. Several areas received another coat as well, just to really accent the details. When this was dry, the dry brushing took place using slightly lighter shades or progressively lighter shades from the Lifecolor Weathered Wood set. This took quite a while because obviously there were subtle differences in the tones just to really build up layers of colour on the wood in different areas. But by the time we got to the lighter tone, which is almost a white, I mean it's very light indeed, it really helped, as you can see here, bring out some of the raised detail on the model. Then selective pin washes using the MIG oil brush, a dark brown, were used to bring out the grain and some of the detail that maybe got a little lost in the dry brushing process. Areas of interest required several coats of this. Next up, the Litchen was dry brushed with successively lighter shades of Deathworld Forest Green, while the ropes were given a base coat of Xandri dust all over. Once again, being very careful to make sure all the details have been painted. Again, with such an intricate model, it's very easy to miss details. While waiting for the paint on the ropes to dry, the skeleton was given a coat of Ushabti bone, being very careful not to get any paint on the surrounding details. To make the figure stand out, a wash of Nuln oil was applied around the edge of the limbs. With the ropes dry, a snakebite leather contrast paint was applied just to really bring out the detail. Had to be very careful again to make sure that all the hidden details were painted as well, nothing was missed. And then once this was dry, a Xandri dust, the base coat that the ropes were painted with, was then reapplied with a dry brush. After the skeleton was given a wash of Griffin sepia, various highlights were added just to bring the detail back out again. As this is a real centrepiece of the model, it's worth spending a lot of time getting as much detail in this as possible. It also helped restore maybe some of the arms and legs, the extremities that had been lost during the other washes. Next up, the bell was painted using tin bits, using quite thick coats to get a really nice coverage, while larger metal areas were base coated with ironbreaker. Again, several coats were used in several places to get a really nice thick coat. Then various highlights were added using Runefang steel just on the edges where it caught the light. This is repeated in several stages just to really get a nice tone to the metal. When this was satisfactory, an overall wash of Nuln oil black was applied, being careful to really make sure the details stood out and not really worrying if it went over the metal bands into the surrounding details. At this point, some of the smaller details, such as the starfish and the barnacles on the side of the hull, were painted. Next up, the Algae in powder and colour set from Lifecolor was used to add an extra layer of colour to the Seaweed, the greener parts of the model. This was sprinkled on liberally, different colours were used. While researching this build, I came across a really good video by Black Magic Craft, and he used cotton wool dipped in a mixture of green wash, white glue and water to provide seaweed, the strands of seaweed. Although I wanted to stick my finger more than the model, it looked really effective, and this was added in various stages just to get a really nice extra level of detail on the model. It's worth remembering that it dries thinner than you think, so some bigger strands were put on with the kind of mixed wash basically being painted onto them in situ, as it were. Next up, the mascot was painted using contrast dark oath flesh and Talassar blue. This provided a quick way of just adding some interest, while these areas were further highlighted when I just had a bit of time waiting for other parts of the paint to dry on the build. So once again, some more seaweed was added using the previous technique. I thought it just looked really good. Some slightly thicker strands were added and washes of yellow and green were applied just to give it a real colour contrast. Perhaps the most intimidating and scary point is airbrushing the OSL lighting effects on an effectively finished model. A very watered down golden yellow was applied first and then lightened with white, checking to see that it lined up with a lamp on a regular basis, while subtle tones were sprayed on the underside of the arm. Various yellow highlights were added and dry brushes just to really pick out the lighting effects to complement what had been done with the airbrush, with the arm being put back in place just to make sure that the light effects were in the right place. Finally, some washes of Nuln oil black were used to highlight areas that would fall into shadow, and this I feel really complements the basic OSL lighting technique. And with that done, the model was pretty much finished. So here's the finished Reaper Shipwreck Revenant. I had a great time painting it. There's so much detail you can bring out on this model. It's almost knowing when to stop. And it took quite a while to do, and the video as well, so I haven't really thought about what I'm going to do next week. But there will be a video next Friday, so thank you again for watching, and take care.